What is cracking, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Golf on Tap. On today's show, we'll discuss the Mexico Open, the latest on the PGA Tour, and LIV potentially getting a deal done, as well as a preview of this week's Cognizant Classic and much more. Make sure to jump on over to the YouTube feed so you can interact with us throughout today's show. What's up, Daniel? Appreciate you always coming in. And subscribe to On Tap Sportsnet over on YouTube as well. You can also check out the show for free wherever you may listen to your podcast. Ross, a tough Sunday at Vedanta World, not only for you, but for many people in the golf betting community, as I believe Aldrich Potgeiter was the most tipped golfer in the golf betting community. Has a good cushion going into the final round, and not able to get the job done. Not only it's in heartbreaking fashion, Ross, as a tree saves Brian Campbell's hopes. It was gone. It was going in the jungle. And Brian Campbell makes one of the most miraculous fours I've ever seen to beat Aldrich Potgeiter in a playoff. A true heartbreaker at Vedanta World. Ross, the floor is yours. Give me the vibes here on the show today. And also just take me through the 4 to 5 hour sweat it was on Sunday watching Aldi Potts.
So the first thing I'm just going to point it out directly is in the header where, 99 times out of 100, that thing's in the jungle. It's gone. So that one tree specifically out there on Vedanta World, fuck that tree.
Brian Campbell.
Fuck that tree. That is just, I will never get that break in my entire life. It doesn't matter. I'm not the best golfer, but I love to play. I'll never get that break. Never, ever get that break. And the fact that break cost me over $200 on a single bet for me believing in a young, outstanding, talented player, which I also want to circle back to Ryan, that Ryan's biggest thing from last week when we had Monday Q on was that course management. And I get it. Course management's a big thing. Unless you're playing at Vedanta. Vedanta is hit the ball a fucking mile down there. Go play it again. You're going to be just fine. Unless you do a shot like Brian Campbell did on the second hole of a playoff, where you just banana hook it into the forest and somehow you get a fucking members bounce back into the fairway, essentially, to just set you up and save it. I'm salty about this one. I'm not as salty as Max Grazeman. That 0 for 3, Max, 0 for 3. I'm just saying that will never go away. I have written that one off. But this one sucked. I looked at the cash out multiple times. They were offering good on it for what I had. And I just kept saying, no, he's got the length here when we're going into this playoff against Brian Campbell. He's going to have an eagle look when Brian's got a birdie. I'm going to bet on that. And then the forest won on me, man. The forest won.
And I definitely want to go back to having Ryan French on the show last week because, as you alluded to, we talked about Aldrich Potgeiter. Quick shout out to us for not only mentioning him, but several other high-end finishers at the Mexico Open. We'll get into that here in just a second. But going back to what Ryan said on the show, the course management is not the best from Aldrich Potgeiter, but an absolute specimen, only 20 years old, kind of the length and distance. That's what I was thinking the entire time. Blackhawks.
That's the only Brian Campbell that's ever going to be relevant to me. Sup, Soupy? Hope you're doing well.
Working for the Chicago Blackhawks still is Brian Soupy Campbell. I guess we have to make the clarification these days, especially with golfer Brian Campbell being a U of I alum. So a couple of Brian Campbells with Illinois ties. But Ross, going back to that conversation we had with Ryan French, the course management, the lack of good decisions, it was all on display there on Sunday. And even with that, kind of being the forefront and Potgeiter making some nervy chips and some bad decisions, he was still able to hang around thanks to some clutch putting down the stretch, and he was able to, make the 4 on the par 5, get it into a playoff. And I don't blame you for not hedging whatsoever, considering that's the shortest of the par 5s on the course. Yes, that's going to help Brian Campbell as well, but you would think with Potgeiter's length, he's going to have no problem getting there into. And
I was going to say, and part of the thing that led me to keep going on that was Potgeiter is not a strong putter. He is strong off the tee. He has good on the long irons when he can play course management correctly. They noted all weekend that when he is on the green, that is where he comes up short. That is still something he's developing in his game.
The touch.
The touch, everything. But on Sunday, there were a lot of putts that I sat there and was nervy about, that this is a little out of his range. This is a little touchy. And he knocked those down to stay relevant and get through. And sometimes it was eating it up and just being like, I gotta take my loss here. Let's make it a bogey. Let's not make it a double. And he knocked it down. And it was a nervy, touchy putt, but he knocked it down. And when we got through to all this, I was like, all right, one of those sentimental, we're watching a player grow in front of our eyes moments and step up to the moment. I just kept riding. But also, now that I got this part out of the way, honestly, awesome for Brian Campbell. On my end, 10-year KFT grinder, never won an event, finally gets the tour card, coming through, winning an event like this. This is why an event like Mexico is so cool, because it is that story. I've talked with a friend of the program, Savannah Lee Richardson, about this the whole time. And it was just one of those things where, yes, was it a bad beat, bad loss? For sure. But at the same time, I sat there and went, overall golf aspect, you got a 10-year grinder that never won anything, but just kept pushing, let alone a local boy with U of I, but just kept pushing. And guess what? Finally secures a tour card, never won anything. He's a PGA Tour winner.
Yeah, super cool story in the grand scheme of things for golf. Like you said, obviously it's tough to have that perspective in the moment when Aldrich Potts was up in front for a wide majority of the tournament. And talking about the putter, Ross, he was making everything those first 3 days. And the 61 that he shot, 10 under 61 on Friday to really put himself in the mix the rest of the way, still made some big putts on Saturday. And even when the game wasn't fully right and he was nervy, he still made some putts to give himself a chance. And it felt like down the stretch when Brian Campbell made that bogey, I believe at 16 it is, and they were evened up once again going to the last. I'm like, man, they let Potgeiter, I should say. I know I'm a very big pronunciation guy, and it's just tough to get that one correct. Potgeiter, even with all the mistakes that he had made and clearly being nervous out there, they let him hang around. It was an absolute pillow fight down the stretch, and going to the 18th, I was like, he's going to go and nab this bad boy. And I'm not someone who hedges my golf bets or cashes out in general, but that was definitely one I think you ride 100% of the time, considering, as you mentioned, Ross, the length between these two guys. Not only is Brian Campbell short, we know Aldrich Potgeiter is the longest player on the PGA Tour. Brian Campbell was the shortest player in that tournament. For them to go to the 18th tied, they both wind up making birdie. I think that was a pretty marvelous feat by Brian Campbell in and alone of itself, but going to a playoff hole twice and thinking like, I'm definitely thinking Potgeiter's going to get on the green in 2 here and give himself a look where Brian Campbell just doesn't have that opportunity because he doesn't have that distance. But for the tournament to be won on a hole where Aldrich Potgeiter was 100 yards ahead of Brian Campbell, let alone without the bounce out of the jungle, like that is absolutely wild and makes for just, I mean, what we love about this sport, Ross. The underdogs, they might not do it in the same way as the big boys on the PGA Tour, but there's no pictures on a scorecard. And Brian Campbell, look, you didn't watch what happened on that final hole. He went and made a surefire birdie. Obviously, if you watch, that's not how it actually happened, but golf's a crazy game, and for Potgeiter, man, to not get on the green there and to leave himself in the bunker short. I actually saw, Ross, I'm curious your thoughts on this as someone who had money on Aldi Potts. There were a lot of people I saw on Twitter giving his caddy grief in terms of some of the decisions, and I think there was a hole on 13 or 14 where Aldrich missed the fairway and he left it like painfully short of the green. There was the conversation that they had in the playoff where it sounded like he wasn't 100% sure on the number, and Potgeiter winds up leaving his approach short in the bunker, not able to get it up and down, winds up costing him the tournament. Were you like frustrated with his caddy out there whatsoever? Just curious your thoughts on that, because I saw a lot of discourse.
No, I was actually impressed with his caddy. There were several different times that Potgeiter approached him with what he wanted to do, and you could tell that his caddy was not necessarily comfortable with the call, but doubled down on, if you're going to do that, this is where you need to put it. Especially, I want to say it was like 13 or 14. Potgeiter was very set on basically on using like the 9-iron and sticking it in there. And his caddy warned him several times and talked it over with him several times. That's fine, but if you're going to do anything, come short. You cannot go long because you're going to roll off the back, and then we are chipping uphill to a downhill lie. And Potgeiter shakes him off, goes, no, I get it. What does Aldrich do? Aldrich flies long, rolls off the back, does the chip for up and down, rolls 15 feet past down the other way, and bogeys the hole because he couldn't make the 15 feet coming back.
Some of those course management decisions that Ryan alluded to on the show literally played out right in front of our eyes on the weekend at Vedanta World. But I'll tell you what, Ross, even though it was an absolute heartbreaker for you, many others who tailed him, and Aldrich Potgeiter himself, what he accomplished this week as a 20-year-old to burst onto the scene. This is not going to be the last we're hearing of this kid, an absolute spectacle. And for what he's already able to do at his age, like, it kind of reminded me, Ross, the way I think about Aldi Potts, it's like a basketball player you take in the draft who is a 6'10" forward who already plays great defense, can rebound like a grown man. You just got to teach him how to shoot. You just got to teach Aldi Potts how to chip and how to putt. And, you know, golf's a fickle game. Maybe that never happens, but usually with kids who are at this level of talent and just have like that extra gear, that ability to separate themselves from the rest, even at the highest of the highest level in golf, those guys usually wind up panning out and being major studs. I think this was just a little bit of a teaser of what's going to come for Aldi Potts when he does get the rest of his game together. And he's already accomplished so much. I mean, winning at 19 years old, shooting 59 on the Korn Ferry Tour last year in the final pairing at the
61 on the PGA Tour.
Yeah, I mean, the kid's incredible, and I really was impressed too. I don't know if this was like 100% his decision or kind of a media pressure type of thing, but for him to just talk with Smiley Kaufman after losing in a playoff to Brian Campbell, I thought showed awesome maturity for a young man who I'm sure, like, you thought you had your heart ripped out with that bad beat, Ross. Imagine what Aldi Potts was feeling at that point in time. And for him to have the perspective and say, you know, I did a lot of good things this week and hope I'm going to have a lot of more chances in the future, which I think we both know he definitely is going to do. Even though he didn't come out victorious in this one, it was a victory of a week for Aldi Potts, and there's going to be a lot of them coming for this kid in the future, Ross.
Oh, I definitely think his upside is unbelievable, especially at 19 years old, still hasn't even hit 20, working his way through. And let's be honest, you and I have had the same conversation over the weekend. I just love he's a little husky.
I love it, dude. I come on. Give me the oddities in the game. I don't want robots. I don't want watching full swing. You know, we'll get into that a little bit later with season 3 dropping. I don't need to see, you know, jacked Rory lifting weights. Give me big burly Shane Lowry. Give me Aldi Potts. Give me Neil Shipley, who looked like an absolute beauty, not only in season 3, but in that shirtless clip that I hope you found that Grant Horvat posted. I love those guys. They make for cool stories. And again, it's freaking relatable to us fans.
Yeah, absolutely. The entire time, we had our own conversation that Aldrich Potgeiter just looks like an Aldrich Potgeiter, and I love it. I'm in for it. That is how that man is supposed to look. He's supposed to hit the ball a mile. I'm all in. I'm a huge fan. I'm gonna throw him up there on my list, just as big as I was on Ludwig in the past. That just the ceiling is there for the kid to go reach, and I think this was just a little taste that we're gonna see as he develops his game that he can play.
Definitely. I love the curls that he's got rocking too. You know who he kind of reminds me of, Ross? I don't know if you watch Stranger Things, but he reminds me of the kid with no front teeth from Stranger Things a little bit. 100%. But even though it wasn't a victory, great week for Aldi Potts. We got to talk about the guy a little bit more, though, who actually pulled through for the victory, Ross. U of I alum, as you mentioned, a 10-year grinder of the game. Brian Campbell to win on this golf course where, as you alluded to off the top when talking about Aldi Potts and his course decision, this is just a grab driver, an absolute rip it type of course, a long iron course. For Brian Campbell, I don't know if legitimately, he hit his 7-wood amazing throughout the week. Like, what I love about the Mexico Open too, and we'll talk more about this in a second as a whole, the course is an absolute cupcake for like 14 or 15 of the holes. And then there's 3 just absolute monstrous holes. They're like 520-yard par 4s that have like no business being on the same golf course as the rest of these holes. And Brian Campbell was like 250 yards out on all of these par 4s. You would have thought he was playing at like Oak Hill or something, Ross. And for him to go and win this golf tournament, to secure his PGA Tour card for 2 more years after, barely holding on to Korn Ferry status a couple of years ago, making it to the PGA Tour again. We talk about the underdog stories and what makes this sport so great. We referenced it a ton with Ryan on the show last week. Funny enough, we talked about like all the other Korn Ferry Tour guys except for Brian Campbell, who went on and won the thing, but an absolutely awesome story for the sport of golf. And I'm super happy for Brian Campbell, super happy for him that he's got that security for 2 more years, man. That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I already pretty much said what I needed to say. The 10-year KFT grinder never won on KFT, earned his card through the points and performance alone. And 6th PGA Tour start? He's a winner. Card secured. We're moving on. Guess what? On top of that, he's going to Augusta.
Oh, going to Augusta too, Brian Campbell. It's truly hilarious that the winner of the Mexico Open makes it to Augusta for winning that tournament. But some other guys we do got to shout out from the Mexico Open at Vedanta World as well. First guy I got to get to, not really a shout out. I'm a little bit salty with my boy Alex Smalley because he was right there in the thick of it down the stretch when Potts was making bogeys. Jaeger really had nothing going. Steven Jaeger probably should have won this tournament, by the way. Like, if he had his C+ game on Sunday, he probably wins that bad boy, but legitimately couldn't make a putt all day long. But Alex Smalley, 2 under through his first couple of holes, bogeys the par 5-6. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Still, though, with the leaders kind of dropping shots, he's finding a way to hang around. He's at -17, making the turn, only 2 shots back. Bogey's another par 5 to absolutely take him out of contention. I was, following Smalley all week long as he was one of my favorite bets that I wrote up last week. So I was keeping up with him on the shot tracker and everything. He was mashing the ball all week long. First off the tee, first in strokes gained off of the tee. The irons were really good. The putter was getting better throughout the weekend. But man, it was a no stones moment from Alex Smalley. And we've seen a couple of those over the years. So that's one that might scar me for a little bit with him, although he did a lot of good things and has another high-end finish in these weaker fields on Paspalum courses. Got to give a shout-out to Isaiah Salinda, who we mentioned on the show with Ryan last week, and I talked about how I wasn't sure if it was Salinda's PGA Tour debut or one of his first starts, but I actually saw him at the 2023 Shriners Children's Open, and he finished T6, had popped up a couple of times in these first couple of tournaments, but man, what a run by Salinda down the stretch. Out of all the guys who were in the mix, I referenced Jaeger didn't have his best stuff. Smalley was terrible on the par 5s and gagged himself out of the tournament. Aaron Rye was right there. 5 under through his first 6 holes. Suddenly couldn't make a putt. Surprise, surprise. For Isaiah Salinda in just his 4th or 5th PGA Tour start, for him to step up onto the scene and make a run down the stretch. I know he was one shot from getting out of the playoff. Real incredible stuff from Salinda, though, man. An absolute flusher. Another guy who just coming off the Korn Ferry Tour can mash the golf ball.
I am glad that you brought up Salinda, because I wanted to ask you your opinion on this, because I found it absolutely wild that you birdie 18 to go into the clubhouse as the leader, at least tied for the lead while they're on 18. The fact he went and just sat in the media tent, didn't pack up, go to practice range, hitting shots, whatever, hoping for a playoff. Like, brother, you're not going to win this thing outright right now. Yeah. We're on a par 5. They're not going to, more than likely this group, both of these guys in this final group are not going to both bogey this. If anything, they're going to scramble and save par, and it's going to be a 3-man playoff. The fact that he just sat on his ass in the media tent and watched was actually mind-blowing to me.
No, I'm in agreement as well. Shortest par 5 on the course, the 18th. To think both of them are going to make bogey, I think was a little bit asinine. But again, a guy who probably hasn't been in that situation all that much. But I did think that was a little goofy as well. It's like, Salinda, brother, I hate to break it to you. I don't know if anyone told him, but it was like, you got no fucking chance here, bud. Great week, though.
No, I mean, I get it. You're rookie first big moment, whatever, but I feel like you have to mentally prepare for like that moment and that opportunity when it comes. And that's like, I'm knocking that putt down for birdie. I'm signing the card, turning it in, and I am going onto the range, and I am swinging until they tell me I'm done.
Yeah, that was definitely funny.
I've never seen that in a tournament before. What another player sitting, watching, hoping like, oh, we're tied right now, we might go to a playoff. Get your ass out there and stay warm.
No, honestly, I don't know what the strategy is behind that. You can just watch from the range as well. It's not like that. You have a cell phone or something. Like there's several guys.
Trust me, your caddy's gonna tell you when you're out of it. If you're out of it,
yeah, go hit someone just in case. I mean, I don't know.
But right now, for these next like 30 minutes, you are planning that you have to tee off on 18 again. Go hit your drives and stay warm.
The only other person, like legitimately, and this is, I'm sure it's happened in other circumstances, but what's the famous, this is killing me because I write them up in my Sony Open preview every year. Who holed out at the Sony Open to become the first Japanese winner on the PGA Tour? Do you remember what I'm talking about? It's the infamous shot at the Sony Open. He holed out from the fairway rough. It's killing me that I can't remember his name, but the guy that he beat was just sitting there watching on the TV. That's like the only other situation I can think of where a guy was legitimately like watching the final group on TV and like not on the range. Man, it's going to kill me. You gotta pull up his name. Something Aoki. Man, it's going to drive me absolutely wild. I got to look it up now myself.
I'm doing the same thing.
Isao Aoki. He beat Jack Renner. Jack Renner is the one who I'm thinking of. There's like that, if you go and watch just that clip that's on YouTube of it, Jack Renner is literally like white as a ghost in the media center watching Aoki hole out from the fairway. That's the only other situation that my mind drew me back to in terms of Isaiah Salinda, like crisscross applesauce in the media center, rocking back and forth, watching the end of this golf tournament. Definitely do got to give a shout out to someone we're very, very big on here with the program is Joel Damon. Finished T6. What a great run from Joel. And honestly, Ross, not to bury the lead a little bit with the Cognizant Classic, but just looking through my numbers and stuff, like Joel Damon has been playing some really good golf. He's been playing some really good golf. It was a little bit too late for him down the stretch, but just to see him make that run again on a Sunday, I think it's a good sign to come of things for Joel Damon in the future.
I fucking loved when, on Friday when Potgeiter shot the 61 and they asked Joel about, do you think you could ever do something like that? And he was like, absolutely not.
With 12 more, he's like, is it a scramble?
Yeah. Just the fact, there's a reason we love Joel and we are team Joel. We are fans of Joel. And that was one of those pure, not just because it was comedic, but it was genuine. Joel knows where he is. Joel knows what his game is. Do you think you could ever shoot a 61 like that to put you in contention? No. Absolutely not. No.
Do not have that in the bag. The final thoughts that I have from the Mexico Open, these tournaments are awesome. And I think it's proof that it doesn't take big. I mean, I'm not going to compare the Mexico Open to like a signature event or anything, but you can still have captivating and fun events when it's not the biggest names in the field. And the Mexico Open is a great example of that. I mean, go and look at this leaderboard. Brian Campbell is a guy who probably most people weren't really sure who he was before this week. Potgeiter and Celinda coming straight off the Korn Ferry Tour. He had Joel Damon in the mix, Ryo Hisatsune, Alejandro Tosti, and it made for a captivating last couple of hours, in my opinion. And the golf course, I thought, even though it is a little bit of a hit and giggle, I think for what this week is, kind of like a bye week on the PGA Tour, I really do enjoy these type of events. And even though, the big boys, that's what I enjoy the most. The Mexico Open still finds a way to do it for me, Ross, because it's just hilariously bad golf down the stretch. And you forget how hard it truly is to win golf tournaments when you're, watching the best players and the top tier players on the PGA Tour week in and week out. And there's usually, one or two of those guys who are in the mix on Sunday that'll go and shoot that low score. There was nobody on Sunday at the Mexico Open shooting that low score. And it legitimately felt like 8 or 9 guys potentially could have won that golf tournament with the way that Potgeiter was kind of drifting down the stretch. So I always enjoy these types of weeks, man, and enjoy seeing a guy like Brian Campbell get his moment in his breakthrough PGA Tour victory.
Yeah, sorry, I had to run into Wesley's room. His monitor does a little reset thing every once in a while, and it does a beeping like alert sound until it reconnects to like the actual hub. So I had to go flip that shit off because it was going nuts in the background.
No worries.
But no, I actually love the Mexico Open. I love it because since we elevated all these signature events, it becomes a more limited field. But every year since that happened, obviously we had Rahm and Finau, and then the past 2 years we had Knapp, and now we have Campbell. The past 2 years, this has been an opportunity where it's one of those events. It's where it's not an alternate field compared to like the rest of the year for these types of events. This is a PGA Tour event. This counts for the points, everything. Most people don't play it, at least from the top 25 in the world, right? This is where we get to actually have the first opportunity for the Korn Ferry guys, the guys that are on sponsors exemptions, come through, and you get a good glimpse of who is probably next for greatness.
And that's
if that makes sense.
No, that's a phenomenal point you bring up, because this is something that we mentioned when we had Ryan on the show last week as well. Just even going back and looking at the Mexico Open leaderboard from 2024, like all the guys who wound up making an impact later on in the year and are off to great starts to 2025. We referenced Steven Jaeger, who finished T3 last year, went on to pick up his first PGA Tour win a couple of weeks later by defeating Scottie Scheffler at the Houston Open. Robert McIntyre finished T6. I was actually listening to a podcast today, Ross. Robert McIntyre going into the 2024 Mexico Open was like 80-1, which is just ridiculous considering what we know now about Robert McIntyre, who's a 2-time PGA Tour winner. Andrew Novak finished T8 in 2024. He's been knocking on the door for his first win. Maverick McNeely finished T13. He's been finally broke through at the RSM and had a really good week, finishing runner-up to Ludwig at the Genesis Invitational. So, like, guys who play in the Mexico Open in this tournament, yes, maybe they're not the most household names at that point in time, but they definitely can play out to become bigger storylines and
Jake Knapp went on a run following his win at Mexico until his injury, which I'm going to be completely honest, he's still not the same since he got hurt.
No, he's 100% not.
I don't know how bad that actually messed him up, but you can tell something is different for how hot he was when he got on the tour to winning that event to like the 8 months following, which in between he had his injury. I think there's something still lagging there for him. But I think he's so young in his career and it's such a limited time that he's trying to push through and make the most of the opportunity. But that's what like this event does for people, is propel them to the next level and like you just knocked off the leaderboard from last year. All those guys are regulars on the top of the board now. Yeah. Last year was just the preview to, oh no, like here's the new wave, here they come. I'm hoping that through the future, obviously, as they take away the Monday cues and whatnot, RIP, sorry, Ryan, but as they start to take away these things, I'm hoping that this kind of continues to remain one of those signature events, you could say, for like, what's the next group coming through? This is where so-and-so got their first big break. And when they got it, there's the launching pad and they're off.
1,000%. We love those types of stories, and we love watching guys continue to grow throughout the course of the season. And I'm sure we'll be seeing a handful of guys who popped up on the Mexico Open leaderboard in contention throughout the 2025 campaign. But Ross, as we kind of jump ship from the Mexico Open, before we get to this week's Cognizant Classic, I know you already got your betting card released. We'll get your insight on all of those guys. We got to talk about the latest updates on the Live and PGA Tour front, as of course there was a White House meeting last week. Seeing Tiger Woods in the White House was pretty wild. Seems like there is some good momentum building in terms of the two sides finally reaching a deal. You referenced kind of the options that were laid out in terms of the merger when we last spoke on this topic on the show. Kind of just take us through what we're hearing right now. A lot of positive momentum, and I also want to get your 2 cents or your thoughts on what we've been hearing about maybe Live players coming back on the PGA Tour sooner than we expected.
Yeah, so I will address that second part right away. Later breaking information that came out, it feels like a lot of progress was made on the PGA Tour side of how they want to see this go, but Liv still wants their bite in this. And let's be honest, it doesn't matter where you stand on the situation. Yasser is a businessman. He's going to make sure they get their fair shake. The latest report yesterday was it doesn't look like he's as pleased with the way these things went, that progress was made, but it seems like it swung more in the PGA direction than he would like it to go, as a 50-50 partnership thing. So with that being said, I don't think we're going to see them in the players. That was something I initially teased, that maybe they would throw some invitations out to past major champions or current major champions, etc., like Brooks Koepka, Cam Smith, Bryson DeChambeau. Maybe they would extend them an invite into the field upcoming as a show of good faith. I don't think we're going to get there. It was exciting in the moment, but more has come out since I initially wrote that article. It looks like it's a little more standoffish than we think. Progress is being made, but it's a little more standoffish, where I don't think we're going to get that soon. later in the summer, maybe one of the last signature events. You might see an invitation thrown out there. I don't know. Don't quote me on it. I'm thinking if it does happen, it's going to be a show of good faith. I don't think it's going to be anyone specific, aside from the guys that recently have won a major or whatnot. And so Taylor Gooch, I'm talking to you. Taylor Gooch, you're not going to be invited to the Travelers or anything like that at the end of the year. Don't get your hopes up. Sorry, bud. Bryson, Brooks, maybe you get invited to a SIG at the end of towards the end of the year for shits and gigs on an off week of the live schedule. But overall, them going to the White House is showing that the biggest part is Jay Monahan and the Player Accountability Board went forward, reached out to President Trump because noted golf guy, right? He's in there with Yasser, Liv. They play at his course every single year, Trump Doral. He's in there. They went and they hit the intermediary party to how do we rectify and bring golf unification to the forefront. I think a lot of progress was made there. It's being reported a lot of progress was made there. I don't know what the timeline is. I would still set it at realistically the soonest we're going to see this is maybe a year from now. 2026 would be my hopeful start. But also, I think Liv is very big on just still being their own thing, which is respectable. I mean, they went out, they created a league, they made noise, right? They made noise, but they're also drawing their own crowd. Like Liv Adelaide, everything. Liv Adelaide competes with the PGA Tour event.
Yeah,
like
for sure.
You cannot argue that at all at this point. And it doesn't matter that I'm not the biggest Liv fan. I watch Liv golf, don't exactly love the format, but I watch. You have to admit that there's tournaments like Adelaide that compete head to head with the PGA Tour. They truly do. So I don't think they're going to bow out exactly as easy as people think they are. Like, oh, we got the money, we got the deal, we're in, done. We'll fold whatever, will be a minor league tour, blah. No, that's not happening. They are going to continue as their own entity. They are going to continue. They are looking for the moderate ground of our guys can play both whenever they choose. Do they want to play Live Adelaide or do they want to go and play the Mexico Open? We already know what they're going to go play, but they want to be able to have the option. And it's not, the way you need to look at it is the bottom half of the live golfers. We know the top half is going to Adelaide, right? The bottom half, the guys struggling, trying to find form, things like that, and live. Those are the guys that they're looking for options. Well, so-and-so is going to go over and play the Mexico Open this week. Maybe win the Mexico Open, and that's going to be their career boost, and they're kicking the ass they need to come back to live and throw it in overdrive. And that's why Liv has the alternates and are able to bring people onto their teams and whatnot. So team member 4 on Torque wants to go over and play Mexico, win Mexico, and just revamp himself, right? That's what they're looking for.
And I do think another positive for Liv kind of maintaining its own entity and being its own thing is I've heard too, like not everyone wants to go back to the PGA Tour and be a PGA Tour schedule. And obviously we know they've thrown a bunch of money in it. I don't really know if they want this to be a success, but they want it to be a thing for sure. And I think providing that option for other guys who are already there instead of, again, just kind of taking jobs out of the professional golf world isn't a good thing. There's obviously a lot of details that still need to be figured out, and it's going to be a process that we need to work through, unfortunately.
I was going to say, honestly, I think the best person you could set up a scenario to expect is someone like Bryson DeChambeau. who is one of the most competitive people out there in the world, right? He plays 13 live events a year. They're slated different weeks over the course of 8 months. Bryson DeChambeau wants the option to go back to the PGA Tour in between the live stuff. And, live is off for 2-3 weeks, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to go knock out these 2 events because, they're playing at Quail Hollow this week. Obviously, we're talking about if this was like the Wells Fargo, whatever. Still would have been a big tournament, just naming tournaments off the top of my head. But, like, he wants that option, the in-between the off weeks of live. Yeah, no, I'm going to pop over there. I'm going to go play some of those for a little bit and just balance out my schedule where I'm only playing 13 on live. Maybe I'd like to play about 30 events a year, right? 13 live, 17 PGA. That's what they're trying to figure out to give those guys the option, because you do have sickos like Bryson that just want to play the game, and he'll go play. Wouldn't be surprised if 2026 Bryson DeChambeau is playing the Cognizant Classic because it just fits his schedule for live, and he wants to go over. Fucking, I'm going to play a PGA Tour event.
Yeah, I think it's definitely important to have those options, because a guy like Bryson DeChambeau, his desires doesn't match up with every other professional golfer, right? And some guys will want to go back to the PGA Tour, I'm sure, and play a full-time schedule. We know Bryson, as an entertainer, wants to stay on live and go to these unique venues in different parts of the world and help grow the game of golf, right? Having that avenue allows him to still achieve those things in the game while still being relevant on the forefront for the big time golf fans on the PGA Tour as well. Ross, I know you'll be having us covered on all things between the PGA Tour and live, as hopefully this merger comes together sooner rather than later. Next thing I wanted to bring up real quick before getting to the Cognizant Classic as well is Full Swing Season 3 has officially dropped. And Ross, being the true golf sicko that you are, you've already finished it. I don't want you to be giving out big spoilers or anything out there to anyone, but just kind of give us your thoughts on trial run number 1 on Full Swing. And I know there's going to be a handful of more watches, probably another one tonight as you binge watch the entire 3rd season. But how have you thought about Season 3 so far, my man?
The product just holds up. Not to brag, not to sound too cool. I've already chatted with Chad Mum today. That was kind of cool. But no, the product holds up. This is the one thing that golf sickos like, getting the inside look at players behind the scenes. They had it all. They jumped into player reactions for Scotty. They jumped into the President's Cup. They jumped into Keegan for being left off the Ryder Cup to, hey, you're going to be the guy that brings it home. They didn't miss a beat. Love the cast. Love everyone that they had involved. Everyone was very personable. Everyone was very expressive. I really enjoyed that. Season 3 knocks it out of the park. It's better than the first 2. And so I've already been messaging Chad and saying, all right, when's season 3.5?
From what I've seen, I really enjoyed it.
I was gonna say, I know you got a 0.5 out there. Just let it out early.
Just drop it for us. Come on now. But what I've seen, I'm only about 2.5 episodes through up to this point, but I've really enjoyed it so far. I thought Neil Shipley, as I told you before jumping on the pod, I thought he was awesome. And just being like a true college bro, I thought was hilarious. And quite honestly, not like the exact personality that I thought Neil Shipley was going to have, as I've only watched him like play golf and just kind of be like a little awkward in interviews from time to time, right? Like I thought he was awesome.
I was going to say, the way I got a whole different perspective on Neil Shipley from this, because the way I perceived him, and this is not a shot at him, the way I perceived him was literally the meme from the Masters clubhouse, yes. The looking out of the corner of his eyes. I perceived him just to be that type of like kind of weird, awkward, like what do I say now?
Especially he's an engineering major, right? Like he's a super like smart kid at the Ohio State University, as he clearly emphasized when saying it on the show. But I love immediately, like 30 seconds into his first showing on his episode, he's talking about having the beer, holding up the Xbox, and I was like, this guy knows what's up. Neil Shipley's a good dude. So I enjoyed that.
That was my favorite part. When he talked about his engineering background. See, I got 2 cases of beer holding up the Xbox right now.
Pretty proud of that engineering work. Yeah, Neil Shipley is an absolute beauty, and excited to hopefully see him more sooner rather than later. Also wanted to bring up, I completely forgot that Scotty Scheffler cried after getting drummed by Ludwig and Victor 9-up at the Ryder Cup, the worst defeat in Ryder Cup history. Honestly, that week was just like so chaotic, as all Ryder Cups are. You forget about little things that happened. But Ludwig making Scotty Scheffler cry, I should have like immediately like known how big of a dog this guy was going to be, because that was before any of the majors. That was before the runner-up at the Masters, before he won at the RSM Classic. Like that right there in a load of himself, we should have been like, yeah, this guy is fucking him. The number 1 player in the world's crying over there on the side of the golf course.
I'm just gonna say, you could do a spin zone on that. That yes, Ludwig did make Scotty cry in Rome, but at the same time, that did make Scotty Scheffler the most unbeatable golfer in the world ever since then.
So, that is true, but
you drew
Ludwig's
blood
coming. Ludwig's coming.
You drew blood. Scotty decided to go commit homicide.
I think Ludwig's coming, man. I think he's going to be the next big one. Like, obviously, we're not really like breaking news here or anything. We know Ludwig has this immense talent, but just watching him from last year and how he handles himself, and he talks about, like, these are just little things that stand out to me that tell me this guy has dog. I love him mentioning, this wasn't from Netflix actually, but this was from after his win at the Genesis Invitational. He told Amanda Balionis he's like an avid leaderboard watcher. He always wants to know what he has to do. He's never like scared to go and look up at the leaderboard and see himself in the lead. I absolutely love that. That tells me that this guy has dog. And just him talking about like how he gets those nerves, but he like understands that it's part of the moment and seems to always handle himself perfectly well. The bigger the moment gets, like, those are all signs that this kid is going to be a specimen moving forward. And just watching the first episode of Full Swing gave me that reminder again after Ludwig winning the Genesis a couple weeks ago.
The only side thought I had on top of that for season 3 is, we already know what the lineup is. They released it a long time ago. The only disappointment I have, the only disappointment and grievance I have is, wow, they didn't get anything with Nick Dunlap.
Nothing. Really? That's a little odd. I wonder.
The list that was released of who is going to appear is the list. There are no extracurricular people in. Nick Dunlap was not on the original list. Nick Dunlap's story is not touched on. I thought that was the only one I wish you could devote maybe 15 minutes of editing, whatever, to. I thought that was a miss. That's the only one. Otherwise, I watched all 7 episodes today while I worked from home. It was great. I love the product. Once again, excited already for season 4 and what we're going to get. But that was the one I felt like was a miss on a story that was there, because you focus so much on Ludwig and the build up from being that new young gun to, why don't we talk about the first amateur that won an event since 1991, guys? That was out there.
I wonder if, like, because of him being an amateur at the start of the year and not really being on their radar, and also winning as an amateur, obviously he went on to win again later on in the year, right? That would have been a cool, like, follow-up story, especially, like, him kind of struggling after his win and then, like, finding his footing throughout the course of the season, then to him picking up his second win and really, like, stamping himself as not just, like, we knew Nick Dunlap wasn't going to be a one and done guy, but for him to win twice during his rookie season, which he didn't even know was going to be a thing at the beginning of the year, yeah, that definitely would have been something cool for them to capture. But I'm excited to dive through the rest of it. I'm going to be binge watching throughout the rest of the night as I drum up my card for the Cognizant Classic. And speaking of the Cognizant Classic, the Cog, aka Not My Honda, is the latest tournament on the schedule as the PGA Tour departs from Mexico and heads to Florida for its 4-week Florida swing. I'll be at Bay Hill next week, which I'm super excited about, to go see an incredible field and incredible golf course. But with this being kind of a 2-week bye for the PGA Tour after a couple of signature events, we had Mexico last week, 2 more signature events on the schedule in API, as I just referenced, in the Players Championship. The Cognizant Classic doesn't usually get the best fields any longer, but still a golf course that intrigues me a ton, even though they have kind of watered it down these last couple of years. And I think the reason they've done that, Ross, is because, well, first off, they know a lot of big name players don't like to come here in the first place because of the scheduling. And also, from what I've heard in the golf community, is there's a lot of people who don't want to embarrass themselves on this course because like 80s are possible with the amount of water hazards. Water's on 15 of the 18 holes. Like, you'll see big numbers on this golf course, and 6 of the last 11 years, it's ranked as the hardest non-major venue on the PGA Tour. But they've extended the par 4 10th these last 2 years to make it a par 5. It's now a par 71, but still a pretty big boy golf course. And that's honestly what it was designed to be from George and Tom Fazio. It held a lot of big events, the Ryder Cup. It's a prestigious golf course, and Jack Nicklaus has got his hands on it since 2002. He's done 3 renovations ever since. So it's a big boy golf course. Austin Eckroat did set the tournament record at 17 under last year, considering there's rainfall in the Palm Beach Gardens area these opening couple days of the week, and also just that extra par 5. I think we'll probably get something similar, Ross, but regardless, it's still a testing golf course, which we always enjoy to see these guys tested, as we talk about a ton on the show. We don't think that happens enough, but kind of give me your level of excitement for the Cognizant Classic. It's not an absolute home run like we're going to get at the Players or API, but it's also a clear step above the Mexico Open.
Well, there's one thing that you already hit on. I don't know if you've noticed that everything they post so far this week is a beware of alligator sign for the Cognizant. And the main reason they do that is because there's so much fucking water, to remind you that no matter where you go on this course, make sure you check for an alligator, because you're going to be around water.
100%. And not only are there a ton of water hazards, the bunkers play super hard on this golf course. You got pretty narrow fairways. They're just 28 yards wide on average. The rough, they grew up a little bit this year, up to 2.5 inches. And then we haven't even mentioned the Bear Trap yet, one of the most iconic 3-hole stretches on the PGA Tour. 2 par 5 sandwiched between a long par 4. And those are actually the 2 shortest par 3s on the golf course, Ross. The other 2 on the front 9 are both over 200 yards. The par 4s are pesky here. Really, the name of the game is just scrambling and making pars on the 3s and 4s and taking advantage of the 3 short par 5s. Going through some of the stats I just wanted to bring up real quick before I'll let you go through your betting card, Ross. Some of the things that I wanted to look at. I will not be running a show with Joey Ricotta this week, so did want to go through some of the stats, which you can all find as well in my preview article. Check out ontapsportsnet.com. I'm really looking at approach and tee to green just because you need to be so accurate and keep it out of the water here. But with all of the difficulty, and another thing I should mention is the winds usually howl, as this course is just 7 miles off of the ocean. It's keeping it steady from tee to green and having a solid around the green game, specifically with Bermuda agronomy, as this is a Bermuda golf course. I also am looking at the par 5s from 500 to 550 yards. All 3 par 5s lie in that range. Strokes gained total in difficult conditions. And then proximity from 125 to 175, about 55% of the approaches come from that range. Some other comp courses I'm looking at too, some other positional Bermuda tracks that we see on the PGA Tour schedule. Waialae Country Club, Innisbrook is very similar. They both play pesky and are Florida courses with a lot of water. TPC Twin Cities is obviously in Minnesota, but is another TPC design track that features a lot of water. Concession is a course that used to be on the schedule that's featured in Florida with tough bunkers and tough tee to green play. So that's basically what I went through in my model this week. Again, if you want to read up more on that, you can easily find my article at ontapsportsnet.com. But Ross, turning it over to the betting board at the top, we'll call them the Big Five. I think they are pretty much the clear-cut favorites heading into this week. Shane Lowry, who has an incredible history here. Daniel Berger, who has an incredible history here. Same with Russell Henley, who's won this golf tournament. Same with Sung J M and same with Sepp Straka. All guys who have been crushers at PGA National in the past. Who'd you start your card with?
I hit Shane Lowry at 20 because every single year Shane Lowry comes into the Florida swing in general out swinging.
He loves the Florida swing, dude. Loves it.
I'm going to be completely honest. I'm just going to preview the Florida swing that as we move through these next weeks, Shane Lowry is probably going to be on my card almost every single time because he is just, it's almost a miss if he's not included because he's going to play himself into contention in all these events. He just, for whatever reason, from going from port rush style on the ocean in, England and Scotland and all that stuff to transitioning down here for the Florida swing. For whatever reason, he always just swings over here, posts great numbers in all these tournaments that I think that just if you're a betting man or woman, you need to take him into consideration every single week here for the Florida swing.
Yeah, and especially here, PGA National is probably the one that he's got the best track record at out of all of them. This is always the time of the season when Shane seems to flip that switch and really get it going. Still looking for his first PGA Tour win by himself in 5 years, but this feels like it's a really good spot for him. Should have probably won in 2022 when Sepp Straka won. I don't know if you remember that in particular, Ross, but as Shane Lowry was trying to close out the tournament, it just started downpouring on him. And I think he made a couple of bogeys in the final few holes to blow his chances, but I'm definitely looking at Shane Lowry this week as well. Too much of a good history on this track to definitely ignore. And Daniel Berger is the other guy who I'm really the most interested of on this top five. I haven't made a decision between those two, but those are the names that immediately stood out to me.
I included Daniel Berger in mine, and the only reason is Daniel Berger finished runner-up in 2015, as well as fourth in 2020 and 2022. Missed the cut last year in one of his first starts coming off of injury. Gave up 5 strokes putting to the field. Yeah. Every other time he has played this course, he has gained strokes. I think statistically for Daniel Berger at this course, his average finish is like T8. Where
money.
I'm going to follow up for the fact that his last 2 starts, second at the Waste Management, 12th in the Genesis, been off the last couple of weeks, just rebounding. I think we are very close to the Daniel Berger that we all knew, the Daniel Berger that we're used to before he got hurt. And this, I bit on him early. I put my card in early because he was going down so fast. I initially looked at him at 30. I got him at 25, but I wasn't going to miss that. The course history, the success here lines up that I need Daniel Berger on my card here because just the way it lines up, that it feels like I'm going to hate to miss this one when he does a rebound here. He may not win, but I am thoroughly expecting well inside the top 10, playing well, and hopefully leading into a deeper success of the Florida swing.
Yeah, this is a DB spot in Florida, straight vibing. He's a Florida boy, so you know he's going to be comfortable. You mentioned the incredible history that he has here. Usually has been usually putts lights out, and the ball striking has been obviously excellent over his last couple starts as well. So I'm really having a tough time dictating between Lowry and Berger. Maybe I just throw them both on my card like you did, but I honestly do like the middle tier of the betting board as well. But who do you got next on your card, Ross?
So after that, shout out Scratch. I'm gonna take a bite here.
You take Denny.
Been very impressed with this play lately. I threw Denny on.
You know what's funny? I was laying in bed last night, literally like contemplating myself. I'm like, Denny could win this week, but I can't bet Denny. I can't bet Denny at 40-1, man. I just cannot do it. I've seen this guy melt down the stretch too many times, and whenever he does have it down the stretch, it just feels like it's not good enough. I don't blame you for taking it. I know there are a lot of people on Denny. He's just kind of not my forte, and Scratch always comments on my stuff when Denny's in the mix, and I'm like, I know you're a big Denny guy, but I don't have faith in Denny quite like you do. This middle tier for me, I don't love the Pendrith number, but I do think this is a better golf course for him than people expect it to be.
He showed up in a lot of what I was reading. He was on there. I eventually cut out and just bit on Denny's been playing hot, and I'm gonna give Denny a shot off playing hot.
Yeah, but I understand.
And that's a whole gut thing that he's put himself in contention and played well. And this feels like this course does set up well to him. I'm just hoping that this is going to be, can he put 4 consecutive rounds together? If he was going to anytime soon, this would be the type of course that sets up to him.
I would agree. I would agree. This is a good setup for Denny for sure. The middle tier is really where, like I said, things get interesting for me though. Andrew Novak at 50-1. I don't love that number. It's been absolutely smashed, but I do think this is a good spot for Andrew Novak. I usually like him on Bermuda. Billy Ho at 55-1 is super intriguing to me. You got Billy Ho on the card?
I got Billy Ho at 50 on the card.
Yeah, I don't blame you whatsoever.
This one is that same thing where he's not flashy, not too special, but his game lines up here so fucking well. And in the middle of the pack at 50, I was willing to bite at that number that Billy Ho will play himself into contention.
Billy Ho at 50 on Bermuda and in Florida. It just makes a lot of sense.
And then I do have one more person on my card at 50, and then I have 2 more farther down.
Who you got at 50?
I also have Luke Clanton at 50. Luke Clanton has won multiple junior tournaments at this course.
I know. I saw a bunch of clips today.
Luke Clanton is from here. Luke Clanton is very fucking good in general, and this is the sponsor's exemption for him to potentially earn a PGA card. I'm not going to be surprised if Luke Clanton just goes out and fucking wins the whole goddamn thing and secures a card for 2 years.
I think it's so there's obviously been a lot of people backing Luke during his hype train of his. This number 55-1 on this golf course, I think out of all the numbers I've seen on Luke Clanton since he's come to the PGA Tour, this is undoubtedly the best one. I do worry about him putting it in the drink, but he's very comfortable with this course, even just more so than PGA National in general. Like growing up in Florida, very familiar with Bermuda agronomy, very familiar with Florida golf courses in general that usually feature a lot of bunkering and water hazards. I do worry about like his accuracy over 72 holes, but 55-1 was a real intriguing number to me as well, man. I looked at that for a long time, and I have not made an official bet yet. I still got to run through some more numbers, and with the Blackhawks being back in action, just kind of don't have as much time as I would like at this point. Who you got from down the board though, Ross? Who are the last 2 guys you got on your card?
So from there, I hit him way lower than I wanted to, because when I started looking at him last night, he was out there at about 90 to 100. He's been smacked down to 75, but I still jumped because I liked it. Ryan Gerard.
Ryan Gerard has been absolutely smashed. One of the most popular bets this week. And it's funny because I got to toot my own horn here for a second. Ryan Gerard, I believe, was in 2022. Do you have it written down, or do you know off the top of your head what he finished at the Cognizant Classic in 2022? I can't remember. It might have been like T6 or something, but he has played here before. And I live bet Ryan Gerard to finish inside the top 10 at like plus 450 going into the final round, because nobody knew who Ryan Gerard was. And I barely even knew who Ryan Gerard was, but he cashed for me that week. And I mentioned Ryan Gerard. I don't know if it was on the show with you and Ryan, but I definitely mentioned it on the show that I did with Joey. Plays par fours really well, has a lot of good irons. Didn't do much over the weekend at Vedanta, but actually hung in there. It was right in the mix through the opening 36 holes. I understand Ryan Gerard on this setup where he has a good result in the past at that number, even if you got it a little bit later than maybe you wanted.
Yeah, I mean, it's later than I wanted, but he's been popping up on the board more often, and I went off the last 5 were 14th at Worldwide Technology, 37th at Sony, 51st at the Amex, 15th at Farmers, and then 17th last week at Mexico. For his 5 tournaments that he got invited into.
Yeah.
So
I don't have a gripe.
And then like you mentioned, previous history at this course, played pretty well. I was willing to bite on the 75 I got. I was hoping for the 85-90. I bid at 75 because it's still worth something. And we're gonna round out my card with number 7, the last person that I've seen multiple people bring up and talk about, that he's way, way down there. But goddamn, does his game line up for this type of course if he can play it for 4 days. Matteo Montecero at 170-1.
Yeah, definitely way too big of a number. And I think the only reason for that, Ross, is because he hasn't played well so far on the PGA Tour early on in the season, but hasn't really gotten any setups that match up very well with his game. He's not a long hitter of the ball, but he has a good track record around this place as well. And Mateo, or these types of golf courses, I should say. And 220-1, considering what we've known about Matteo from last summer, like, he should not have, and this is not a knock on these guys at all, but like, he should not have bigger odds than Quade Cummins, Max McGreevy, Ben Martin. Like, Matteo Montecero's a legit proven player. So when I actually saw those numbers early on in the week, I don't blame anyone for betting that. I think it's one of the best values from 100 plus this week at the Cognizant Classic for sure.
He's also caddied by the most handsome man in the world. And so maybe throw a little cash on him for when that handsome man grooms him into the top 10. And it's a hedger's dream if you want, because you can get him out there at between 500 and 800 on that number.
I love the strategy. There are so many guys from over 70-1 who have caught my eye. I've been a sucker for Lee Hodges. He has 2 really good results on this golf course. I don't think I have the willpower to lay off Lee Hodges this week. Gary Woodland is another guy I've been suckered into for far too long. This is another.
This is like your kryptonite. When Lee Hodges is anywhere relevant, you just need to throw money on him.
You know I'm going to bet Lee Hodges at Bay Hill next week when I go, right? Because if he wins and I don't have money on him at Bay Hill, it might be the end of me for good. But definitely keeping my eye always on my boy Lee and Gary Woodland. I don't know, like, I think, don't tell Tweeth that I said this, but I think Nico Echeverria could pop up again this week. Not a fan of Scumbag Nico, but this is a course that makes sense for him. There's a lot of guys from further down the board that I don't think I'm going to get to in the outright market, but for like DFS purposes and for guys who just like betting on top 20s or top 40s who could be tuning into this right now, there's a lot of money, I think, to be made on guys from further down the board. I think Pearson Coody is a really interesting name this week as well. Tom Hoagie, 150-1 on this golf course, even if he's got a disastrous history, is interesting. Who's another guy that from down here that comment? Ryo Hisatsune, 200-1, guy who finished, I think, T3 at the Wyndham Championship in the fall, which is a full Bermuda golf course, just finished T10 last week at the Mexico Open. Rio 200-1 is probably going to end up on my betting card. Yeah, a lot of guys to be also. I wanted to ask you this. I saw this number out there on this guy, 600 to 1. I don't think I'll get there. Did you know Danny Willett finished T9 at the Farmers Insurance Open?
Yeah, I did.
I don't know how that got by me.
Because ever since I made that comment of what's one thing in golf that happened that you believe never happened, I said it was Danny Willett winning 2015. And then ever since I actually put that in a recording, Danny Willett decides to go out there and fucking stick it to me every time.
I did not know he finished T9 at the Farmers. That was his last PGA Tour start, which was a little over a month ago. But Danny Willett is 600 to 1. That's interesting. I don't think I'm going to get there, but I think that's interesting. Camilo Villegas, 600 to 1. Not probably an outright bet, but in my model this week, Camilo's like 13th with his irons. He's 13th on approach, or at least in the top 20, I know for sure. For a guy who's 600 to 1, that's interesting. But those were definitely guys I did want to shout out. Probably not smart outright bets, but guys, Joey and I usually like to mention you can make money on in different ways.
I was gonna say he's a Florida-based guy. I would bet top 10 something on Camilo coming up there.
And I'm pretty sure. Go ahead.
I don't think that's very big, like outside the box bet at all.
And I don't have it pulled up in front of me, but I was going through his profile and looking at his past history at PGA National. I know he has at least a couple of top 10s under his belt here. So, those are some guys that I'm looking at down on the odds board. I will be having my best bets article dropping tomorrow for the Cognizant Classic. Make sure to be on the look for that. Ross, any final thoughts before we get on out of here, my friend?
Fuck that tree.
Yeah, that's a good final thought. Fuck that tree, man. I am happy for Brian Campbell, I will say. We love those good stories. We love the underdogs coming through on the forefront. Unfortunately, Aldrich Potgeiter had to be at the expense of that. But the beat goes on, Ross. And listen, Ross, let me tell you. The best weeks happen after the biggest heartbreaks. I got my absolute heart ripped out the second week of the year. Nico and JJ Spawn both losing to Nick Taylor, who chipped in for Eagle on 18. The only way I didn't cash a ticket that week is if Nick Taylor chips in for Eagle on 18, and he did. But since then, Sepp Straka has cashed for me. I've cashed Ludwig, and I found that to be a common theme over the years. When you have those tough heartbreaks, you just got to keep going because you know you're close, and you're going to be cashing one soon, my friend.
Max Grazerman last year at the Wyndham followed up with the 3M by also finishing fucking second again.
Okay, well, the 3M was the first one. The 3M was the first one, and he didn't blow it that time. He actually made a nice birdie on the last to finish T2. But I think there's going to be a victory coming.
You see where I'm going. I had the one flaw in your logic. It's fine. It's fine. Fuck Max Grazerman. You've written off forever, but whatever.
You got to keep believing, Ross. Don't let the tough losses get you down, my friend. There's a big victory coming for you, I promise. Thank you to everyone who tuned into this episode of Golf on Tap. As always, make sure to go and check out the show for free wherever you listen to your podcast. That way you can catch up with us. If you're not able to tune in live, subscribe to On Tap Sportsnet over on YouTube and check out On Tap Sportsnet for all the latest golf news and updates, plus news on the Chicago sports front. We also got beer reviews, movie reviews, tons of laid back fun stuff over there. So make sure, again, to go and visit ontapsportsnet.com. Until next time, everyone, enjoy the rest of your week. Crack 'em, lock 'em, and we'll see you next time.